Hey, Ken.
Hey, Bart, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you for joining us today.
Good to see you.
You too. Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Bart Yancey, and thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to have Ken Polk here. Ken is a friend of Fireside, and we've known Ken for several years, and he has built just an ultra impressive organization in Arlington Family Offices. Ken's the CEO and co founder. And Arlington, for those of you that aren't familiar, is really one of the most uniquely built multifamily offices in the industry. And they're focused on helping others build better families, better businesses, and ultimately a better society. So, a very unique approach. And we knew that you all would really enjoy hearing from Ken. And I'm going to turn it over to him and let him share with you for the next several minutes. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, thanks, Bart. Again, it's great to be here. And yeah, so what I'll do, I'll start by just giving you a little bit of background and tell you a little bit about myself in Arlington. So I started Arlington back when I was 25 years old. So I'll start with that. And I always tell people that when they ask about, well, how'd you do that at 25? I said, well, actually, I was just super naive. And so the key is I just didn't know you should do anything any different. So I grew up in a real small town and went to school to actually in college to play baseball, but pretty quickly figured out I wasn't going to be doing that the rest of my life. And so I got interested in business and got my securities license in college. And then I was getting my accounting degree, which I ended up getting the CPA and CFP, but spent a couple of years at Deloitte before really a real simple problem that I saw that needed to be solved. And this was back in 1998, and there was really nobody who was doing investments, financial planning, and tax together. I know. So it sounds like really? No, like there really was nobody doing those three things. And it just didn't make sense to me because you could go to a hospital, and the hospital you could go get an x-ray and you could go get a surgery and you could go get all these things. And you can say the same thing about different practices, and it just didn't make sense to me. So what we started with, what is now Arlington Family Offices, started with a very simple concept that you can combine those things: investment and wealth management, financial planning, and tax. And so after doing that for now 27 years, we have 80 different families. And really, I always say we do three things. There's three things that we do, we provide, is that investment excellence. And then we provide what's called wealth management services, and that's estate planning and tax services, and really kind of anything that is maintaining wealth. And then the third is what we call legacy planning. So the third leg of the stool is called legacy planning, and that's succession and philanthropy and families they have trust in their foundation. So that's really kind of our three focuses. And then in that whole process, I did something that I said I would never do, and that is actually write a book. And so I ended up writing a book called The Spirit of Wealth Preservation. And the tagline of it is, hey, let's leverage our finite life for the infinite good. And so really it was really a journey that I wrote down really for our clients, our past, our present, and our future families at Arlington, as well as our team. But when I went through the process, I was asked to publish it, and I ended up publishing it. It's now published with Forbes Books, and really it focused on two real core, principles, but underneath three laws. And I'll go through the three laws with you. I think this will be helpful just in context of the three laws of preservation. And the first law really is like, it's really, people talk about legacy. What is legacy? Legacy really is who you are when you're gone, or what people remember you by. And that's the first law, and is that your footprint will become the blueprint for your legacy. So the first law of wealth preservation is your footprint of your life will become the blueprint for your legacy. And then the second law it really talks, it's the family part that comes in, because I work with families, and let me back up and just say that the 80 families we work with, they're all families. We've never had any clients at Arlington other than families. So the second law really is about longevity. And what I learned and became the second law is that your family's collective purpose will determine its longevity. So longevity is not like a dream or a hope or a plan. It's actually the collective purpose of the family. And then the third law of wealth preservation is really about lineage, which when I say lineage, people a lot of times say, well, what's lineage? So think about lineage and legacy being different. Lineage is really the DNA that goes down the lines. And I think most families think about it. They think about their legacy, but they think about their family's lineage. And lineage really is, if you want your lineage to last, this is the third law, is the method and means by which you accumulate will shape your family's lineage. And so there's a little secret embedded in that law of lineage that a lot of times what people will miss, and it's the method and means by how you do it will determine your lineage. So let me pause real quick on that. And method and means it's really important on how you do it. And the how you do it is exactly how it sounds. It's how you act and how you grow yourself and all those different things. They actually filter into the lineage of your family. And so the book was really written around those three laws. And then when I said, hey, there were these two kind of pieces of it, or two main things I wanted to address within those three laws. And that was there's a section called Family Inc. And then there's another section called Built on Purpose. And so one is more about a family, and then one more is more about the business side of it. And I think that we all on this podcast know that, I mean, there's both sides. And really, it was a question so I have four kids. My oldest is 26, my youngest is 19 now, three girls and a boy. But really, my daughter was about 9 or 10 when I was posed with a question that really changed the way that I looked at even. So I was building Arlington. And so again, it started at 25, so I was in my 30s. And I was posed with a question that really changed the way I thought about Arlington as a business. And the question is, are you saving your best thinking for your family or your business? So are you saving your best thinking for your family or your business? Now, the first time I heard that, I had to really think deeply about that, because I was in the process of building Arlington. I was working all these hours and it was going fantastic. I thought, and then when somebody hits you, it's like when somebody asks you a question, that you can't run from. And I had to answer truthfully and say that I was saving my best thinking for the business. But I could say from that day on, I was going to apply those same principles to my family. So, I wrote the chapter called Family Inc., and it centers around that question that I was asking. Then it walks through several different things in that chapter. Um, my relationship with my wife and the importance of that, and where the kids fit in that. And so there's a lot of that. And I also wrote a section called Failures Inc. So you can read that and you can see my failures. And so I think it's important. I've learned so many of my lessons in reverse. It's what not to do. And so I think that that part of it is real important too, is that I learned, and then some stories that I shared around my kids. But at the end of the Family Inc. chapter, there's a part in there that I get asked a lot about. And that is when it comes to the estate planning and those different pieces, there's a legacy letter. And I remember when I kind of introduced that and actually wrote about it, is really something that most people didn't do. And so the legacy letter is literally a letter that takes those boring trust documents that nobody wants to read and transitions them into plain language and says, hey, this is a gift of love. It is here to enhance the lives of its beneficiaries. Now think about it, that if you look at a trust document or any legal document, there is nothing that I've ever seen in a document. So, and that was another part of the story that I talk about, is that, hey, all these documents that I had done for these families up until I was posed with this question, I had to go back and fix. And so they were beautiful. They saved a bunch of taxes. Well, that's great, but what happens? You can save a lot of taxes, but there's no spirit, there's no values embedded. So the legacy letter was a way of literally like taking that language, putting the soul, which is actually the chapter right after family, called soul of a document. So and I would challenge everybody as they think about this, and I know these are a lot of different and possibly new concepts for you, but if you really think about it, the goal is when you leave something, is that it has a spirit, because money has a spirit. And the key is that what spirit will it have? Will it have the spirit of education? Will it have the spirit of some of your values in your family? So for me, and again, this is outlined in it, is, the faith, the family, the work ethic, and the stewardship, or those were our values. And so why not connect those and create a soul? And I talk about Thomas Paine was credited with starting the American Revolution, not with a gun, not with a weapon, with words. These are the times that try men's souls. So I think that people kind of sometimes forget the power of the word. And so the legacy letter is just a way of writing that to your family. And so that part is the kind of the family ink and soul of the document. And then really there's a transition in the book that really is called Built on Purpose. And there are 6 stages of a business. So I'm actually going around the curve here, changing subjects, going from family to business. And so in the Built on Purpose, the 6 stages, which I can share, is basically, is really as I built Arlington, and then I look at what Fireside does, it actually is very similar to what Fireside is helping the dental practices do, is they're actually helping them go through these 6 stages. So the 6 stages are, and this will speak to anybody that's probably listening and has a business, is that the first stage is survivability. Hey, it's like cash is oxygen. I just want to get, I've got to keep going and make my house payment. So that's survivability in a business. The second stage is validity. Validity is like, hey, people are showing up. This may work, but what happens? It becomes fun, but you're building an airplane in mid-flight. It's crazy. You're like, what in the world's going on here? It's like chaos. It's super chaos. And so then if you can graduate from validity, then you go to what's called predictability. And predictability is when you say, oh, wow, to get out of this whitewater, I have got to build some systems and processes. And again, that's where Fireside comes in and says, hey, what about this community of people that can help you get to that kind of predictability piece? And then in the predictability piece, and by the way, I didn't write about the first 2 stages and after or think about the first until I got to predictability because I was just trying to survive and be valid. So, but in the predictability piece, when you're ready to graduate, then there's scalability. So, and I think I've seen this so many times. How many times has somebody said, well, you need to build a business and scale it up and sell it or do whatever? And I'm always thinking, wait, hold on, time out. There's 3 other classes to take: survivability, validity, and predictability. And everybody wants to just go right to scaling up. And I always tell them, well, great, Mother Nature is going to re-enroll you in the other classes. So it just works that way. So every time you try to scale up when you're not ready, it actually creates this chaos all across. So the scalability comes after building that predictability. And then the 5th stage is transferability. So, and this was super important for Arlington as an organization because the transferability piece, we built Arlington, and I wrote a whole chapter on this, is that we built it not to sell. It's set up in a perpetual purpose model where the younger generations come along. And so, but every business is different. So there's sell, family, and then I call it the third path. There may be a third path in the transferability. You have to figure out what that is yourself. But after you get, predictability, scalability, there is that transferability. You got to figure out, okay, what's the next stage of this? How does this work in this next stage of the business. And then once the transferability is done, then there's the sustainability is the sixth stage. So sustainability, I think everybody thinks about that and talks about it. But I would just say that, hey, if you rewind, you really walk through the stages to sustainability. And so that was the experience that I had at Arlington, and the vision that I had for the framework on how Arlington is built. So and also just to clarify, we're really in the scalability phase. So we add 5 to 7 families a year. And so our motto is small is beautiful. So that's just our kind of like motto is it's small is beautiful. So we just believe that that's the intimacy can't be scaled necessarily in certain businesses, and ours is one of those because we're dealing with multiple generations. So scaling is different for everybody, but we're actually in the scalability phase. So we're trying to figure out how to keep the human scale, how to keep it intimate. And so scalability may not be, hey, you're just going to like add as many customers as you can. I'd also challenge you to think differently about scalability, but I dream about the transferability and sustainability piece of it. So, and I'll leave you with on the built on purpose. Well, why is that the built on purpose? Like, why do you call it built on purpose? Because everybody's heard of built to last. If you've read Jim Collins, he's got it. But what always was interesting to me in the difference between a built to last and built on purpose, the built to last was be the best in the world. Built on purpose is be the best for the world. So I know it's just a little tweak on it, but we're always thinking is how can purpose is something I can't fulfill while I'm here. Purpose is something when you're gone, it keeps going. So that's kind of the background behind the built on purpose, and then the family Inc. that I spoke about. So I'll pause there and be happy to answer any questions or go through any more details on that. But hopefully that was helpful in getting everybody up to speed.
Absolutely. And I will note if you'd like to ask a question, you can do so through the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So if you've got any particular questions for Ken, he's happy to answer. Let me give it just a second and see what comes through.
And Allison, while we're waiting, I'd love to pull something up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's great. So one of the things that I do want to make sure that I leave the listener with is I talked about the legacy letter and family Inc. And one of the things that can be overwhelming, like what do I do? Where do I start? And so we actually have a checklist that I can send and anybody can use, but I'll share that with you just on the screen here. And basically we call it the Build a Better Family Checklist. And it really takes the 3 laws, the law of legacy, the law of longevity, and the law of lineage, and it has really practical steps attached to it. So if you kind of think about the law 1 of legacy is we have a real simple exercise where you circle your aspirational character traits. You can be 13 years old, you can be 75 years old. And so what you do is you literally circle those top 5 character traits, maybe 8. And for me, and I'm very comfortable with this, my wife was not, but I wrote my obituary using those as like, what will my kids, the community, and my wife say if I were to pass? So now my wife, she writes the farewell letter. It's called a farewell letter. And then if you have younger kids, it's their letter to their future self. So circle their character traits, write a letter to their future self. Very powerful in just thinking about legacy. Then the second law, we do really 3 things. That's clarify values. So we have exercise to clarify values. I think everybody has values. It's just like clarifying them and creating a motto. And I talk about our family motto, but I didn't talk about the process of clarifying values where you circle your values and within the family. And then the second one there under the law too that talks about identifying gifts, I think is missed a lot. I think that if you were to ask everybody, hey, have you taken a gifting test? And they would be like, well, I really have never done that. And so this is a test that helps people identify what they're really good at, and they really don't have to even try that hard. They're just good at it. And so the identify gifts part of this is something that, and I like to say it this way, every young person wants to know why they're here. I think everybody wants to know this, but especially young people, they want to know, why am I here? What is my purpose? But it's really tough to talk to a young person and say, hey, go find your purpose. Go find your purpose. It's really tough. But what you can do is, hey, identify your gifts. When you identify those gifts, then give them away. That's your purpose. So it's a way of just identifying those gifts. And then clarifying values, how we came up with that is that's what parents are worried about. Are my kids going to get my values? So those two are really important. And then the live on purpose is a family planner that we use that's a kind of like pulls it all together once a year to do certain things. And then the last item on the checklist is the law of lineage. And that really is just we call it a generational equipping model. And which really just simply means is that law 3 is I'll do this process. I do this process with my kids. They do it themselves. They do it with their kids. And so we call this the gift that you can give your kids is having a simple process that they can continue to carry on. And so I just wanted to share that while we were waiting on a question or two. And again, I'll provide a copy of that to anybody that would like to look at it.
Absolutely. That's so helpful. We will definitely post that resource in our community. We do have a question from Dr. Kennedy. How would you recommend leading up a generation ahead? So my parents to begin having conversations of values and legacy. So they're entering their 70s and seem overwhelmed at the work that needs to happen to put all of that, the goals and the legacies on paper.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I would say, and the question's coming from someone that's in that age range, is that right? Just to clarify,
The question I think is coming from the generation below that. So I guess kind of the idea of like leading up or managing up with your
exactly.
parents.
Yeah, that's good. So I think that one of the things that, and I mentioned it, the clarifying value, the Build a Better Family checklist, is I think everybody has values. And if you go through a process just to clarify the values, and one of the most powerful things I've seen in managing up to the older generation is that if you have kids, their grandkids, think about it in this way. What if you clarified your values, even if they were yours and they didn't do them, but you went and sat down with your parents and said, hey, mom and dad, would you be willing to help me reinforce these values with your grandchildren? Wow. I don't know any grandparent that would say no to that. So as a matter of fact, they would, they would be excited about that. So I dream about that as my kids who now have gone through this process of clarifying their values. They're 19 and over, so they're their values. They're not mine and Ashley's values. When they clarify their values, then they take those values and they give them to me. And when they have kids, I can't wait to help them to get that. So it's almost, how do you figure out how you get that older generation information and say, hey, help me help your grandkids. And so that is a tactic that I've used, and I plan on doing that myself with my grandkids, even though I don't have any yet. So.
So we got let's see, another, I know one of the things we'd kind of discussed was, especially with our members. Some of them are still evaluating selling their practice. And in that, transferability and kind of the idea of legacy, are there any, I guess, specific things that you would have them keep in mind, or to someone who's maybe in that boat of looking at, I'm not really sure what my transferability plan is yet, but there are, within dental practices, kind of a host of options. What kind of advice would you give to somebody in that boat, or maybe thinking about, that transition in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, and I think that specifically in the dentistry business is, and I go back to saying, okay, well, you can sell it to a younger generation. And then you could also, if a family member is interested in it, obviously. And then the third path, I said the third path, and people probably thought, well, what is the third path? Well, the third path could be that you really do one of those two things. Say you sell it to a younger generation, but you really instill in that younger generation the purpose behind it. Like what, like there's something unique about every person that's practicing. It goes back to gifts. I think people that really enjoy what they do, they're really just leaning into their gifts. And so some people I always joke with people and say, well, I think kids should show up at 6 years old, and my wife loves them 6 and under. So that she just is gifted to take. She loves that. Well, I say the same thing about your business. There are things that have given you this incredible purpose, and it goes beyond money. It may be talking to your customers, you're talking to your clients, your patients. And so what are those things as you dig deep into it that are important, that are transferable, that allow the next person to go further faster? And even more important, you share your purpose with them, what's great about purpose is like it lasts, it continues on. And so I would say when you're thinking about transferability, outside of the box is the third path. And so it's just thinking about it a little differently.
I love that. I think that's such a mindset shift of, thinking about it from that place of purpose, and really, how do I transfer my purpose? I mean, that could look so many different ways. So I think that does probably lend itself to thinking outside the box a little bit, but that is cool. Let me see, there are a couple others. So kind of on the same boat about, family members and kind of the I guess tactical piece of it. We do see a lot of husband and wife teams, and to some degree there are a lot of practices that are operated and really run by one practice owner, but their family or their partner or spouse is the person that's right behind them. So I guess, do you have any advice for including in these discussions, and kind of, these are so family focused, what's your advice for if you've got somebody who's not maybe as involved in the day-to-day of the practice, and the business side of things, but you need to have these conversations around around the family and around the wealth strategy. What would you say to that practice owner who's got a partner or spouse who's maybe not as involved, but you need to kind of bring them into the fold in this way?
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I've done that is just a tactic is really separating out the family part and the business part. And so just one of the just small tactical thing is Ashley and I have Sunday night meetings. And so like now I think she figured out that when she says, hey, let's have a meeting, I like wake up, So to me, I'm like, oh, that's like a business meeting. And she's like, well, no, we're actually going to go through a separate calendar for the family. We're going to focus in on these things that are going, like it's the day-to-day type of things that need to get done. So I would encourage the person that thinks about those is to really yeah, family and business a lot of times are together, but I think separating them and going back to that question is saving your best thinking for your family and your business separately, because they are different. The tactics are so different. For example, is that your children, right? They seem to not think you're as good as you think you are. So especially as they're in their 13 up to, a certain, and then they get really smart again, right, in their 20s. And so I do think that thinking about those in two different buckets and really segregating them out and calling it meetings, say, hey, we're going to have a meeting about family. And then it's every time you build in kind of that intentional system of separating them out, then I think that that's important. And then part of the question may also be is how do I make sure, like if both spouses are in the business, that one is kept up to speed in the business. And I think that's the same way, is really creating a framework and a vision. Hey, we're here. This is where we are in the stages of a business. And this is kind of where we're going. A lot of times that's just a vision conversation.
That's great. I think that that's so helpful. I'm even thinking about it for my family, and we don't own a practice. We had another question. When you're progressing through predictability or scalability, how do you start to think about what's enough or the concept of contentment?
Yeah, so that is a variation of a question that I will tell you is an ongoing question, I think, for everybody, because people like to grow. So it's connected in that the question is how much is enough? So, but people love to grow. So I know that I want to grow. My kids want to grow. People at Arlington want to grow. But the question actually becomes an important question for the individual person, is how much is enough? And so that becomes, it's an unanswerable question, by the way. It's not, and I'm not going to attempt to answer that question. But I will say is that I don't have that question come up for people that are really living and doing what they want to do, and growing, and always growing and growing their mind and growing in what they're doing. But I will say that that's a tough one. And if we ever find the answer to that question, I think we will settle a lot of very important things. But it is, how much is enough is a really big question for everybody to consider as they go through the different stages of their life and of their business.
And another, this is a little bit of a shift of more of a tactical one, but for a lot of our practice owners, most of their income and their net worth is really tied up in the practice. And I think, the idea that, anything that comes in, it goes back into the practice, and especially in that growth stage, is your past survivability maybe, and into validity and into predictability. But for those practice owners, what would you say about, if the, I mean, I know diversifying and building wealth outside the practice is kind of a thought process, but what advice would you give to them, when most of that legacy and truly the income and the net worth is built into the practice?
Yeah. And so the great thing about practices, normally dental practices, they are great in building kind of the lifestyle, a great lifestyle. This is what a great thing and a blessing to have a great practice. And I think the key is just really understanding kind of what the goals are as far as the practice. And I always say that it's the undefeated financial plan, and I call it give, save, live. And you've heard it, people have heard that before, but it's really a discipline in the arena of, okay, well, I'm gonna for me, give, and then I'm going to save, and then I'm going to live. And then so there's this practical piece of it that's just a general framework. Because I've never seen anybody that saved before they lived ever run out of money. It's amazing. It's like, I know it's simple, but it's impossible, basically. And then there's a concept too that I could share with everybody, and then I think it could help, is that sometimes it's just getting things in order helps things grow. And so getting things in order helps things grow. So one of the things I mentioned, I said there's three legs of the Arlington Still: investment excellence, wealth management, and legacy planning. That second one, called wealth management, we actually create what's called a wealth book. So I would encourage, and I'll bring it up on the screen here, but there are 6 questions every family asks. Doesn't matter. It does not matter if you have $100,000 or $500 million? They're the same 6 questions. And so what I can bring up here that may be helpful is just a one pager that shows those 6 questions that every family, and hopefully this will help in also answering the question, is that and a lot, one of the sayings we have is that quality questions equal a quality year. It's like, I think if you ask quality questions, your year is just going to be better. And so these are the 6 quality questions that we ask every year. Is that, what do I own? What do I spend? Is my family protected? That's insurance, right? What happens if I die? Am I minimizing my taxes? And are my investments performing to plan? So every year, those 6 quantitative questions create what's called the wealth book. And that wealth book, then over time, it's amazing. It just kind of compounds on itself. If all those are known and taken care of, and there's ample savings, they continue to be successful.
That's great. That's such a great resource. I love that thought process that when you ask the right questions, the year just sort of falls into place. I think that's
Yeah.
so true for so many things. Well, I think that's the kind of the bold questions we've gotten. We can leave it open for just a minute, but is there anything that we didn't ask you today, or something that you would like to leave us with or share that is, maybe the best question you've ever been asked?
So I think that, and I love great questions, but probably one of the great questions that somebody, and I've shared one of them, is, are you saving your best thinking of your business or your family? And let that one ring. But the question you ask about how much is enough, because that's a personal satisfaction question. But I think that I have just a discipline. I've got like questions everywhere, 360. I've got one for every day. I've got one for every situation. And I think that the question I would ask you, or I ask people, is, are you curious? Do you want to learn? Are you waiting? Are you listening to somebody because you're about to add something to what they're saying? Or are you listening for the intention of being curious and learning? So that would be my just parting thought on.
I love that. Well, Ken, thank you so much for joining us again. I think the session was so insightful, and I love the laws that you shared with us and the frameworks you shared with us. And I know our members are just going to get so much value out of it. So we appreciate your time with us today, and just look forward to seeing things from Arlington and all the good and the purpose that you put into the world. So we really appreciate you, Ken.
Thank you very much, Allison.
Okay, bye everybody.